She had told herself she would leave at 7:30. It was 8:14 and she was still there. My name is Elena. I am 34 years old. I am the chief executive of a mid-sized pharmaceutical logistics company that I have run for the past 5 years, which means I spend most of my time making decisions quickly and most of my evenings wondering if I made them correctly. I am good at my job in the way that requires being not particularly good at other things, the things that happen in the hours when work is finished and the apartment is quiet and the city outside does the things cities do at night when they stop being useful and start being beautiful for no practical reason. It was Christmas Eve. I had agreed to the blind date because my friend Irina had asked me 7 times over 3 months and I had run out of new ways to say no that did not sound like what they actually were, which was fear dressed up as busy. Irina had described him as kind and interesting and someone who had been through something real and come out of it with his character intact, which was how she described people she genuinely respected as opposed to the ones she was simply trying to place. I trusted Irina's judgment about most things. I said yes. The restaurant was a quiet place near the center of the city, the kind that had wooden tables and large windows and served food that was good without requiring you to understand the menu. I had chosen it because it felt like neutral ground, warm but not romantic, comfortable but not casual, the kind of place where a conversation could go in any direction without the setting deciding for you. I arrived at 7. I was always early. It was one of those things about me that I had stopped apologizing for because it was simply true. I found the table Irina had reserved, sat down facing the window, and ordered a glass of red wine because it was Christmas Eve and I was alone in a restaurant and that seemed like the appropriate response to the combination. Outside the window the city was doing the Christmas Eve thing it did, snow falling in the particular soft way it fell on that one evening of the year, the streets lit with the accumulated light of every shop and restaurant and passing car, people moving with the specific energy of people who have somewhere to be and are almost there. I watched it and felt something that was not quite loneliness and not quite contentment but lived somewhere between the two in the way that certain feelings do when you have become comfortable enough with solitude that it no longer hurts and has not yet stopped being noticeable. 7:30 came. I had told myself 7:30 was the limit. I had said it to myself that morning in a practical voice, the voice I used for decisions that did not benefit from sentiment. If he was not there by 7:30 I would finish the wine and leave and tell Irina tomorrow that these things did not always work and that it was fine. 7:30 came and I was still there. I told myself I was staying because the wine was good and the snow was beautiful and there was nowhere particular I needed to be. That was partially true. The other part was something I did not examine too carefully. At 7:45 I called Irina. She answered with the slightly guilty hello of someone who had been wondering if this call was coming. I asked if she had heard from him. She said she had, that he had called her 20 minutes ago, that something had happened and he was on his way and he was so sorry, that she would explain everything later. I asked if he was all right. She said yes, that he was fine, that she promised it would be worth the wait and that I should please stay. I looked at the snow and the wine and the empty chair across the table. I stayed. He came through the door at 8:14. I knew it was him immediately, not because I had been given a photograph but because he came in with the specific energy of a man who has been moving fast for too long and has just made it and is now trying to slow down to a speed appropriate for a restaurant. He was wearing a dark green plaid coat, slightly damp from the snow, and he was holding the hand of a small girl. She was perhaps 5 or 6, with light blonde hair and a green coat that matched his in the way that parents and children sometimes matched on occasions that had been dressed for, and she was looking around the restaurant with the interested expression of a child who finds most things worth examining. She was also, visibly, the reason he was late. He saw me. He stopped for just a moment, the kind of stop that is not hesitation but recognition. Then he came across the restaurant toward the table and I stood, the automatic response to someone approaching, and he said my name as a question and I said yes and he said his. His name was Andre. He said he was so sorry, immediately and completely, not in the performed way people apologize when they know they are in the wrong but in the direct way of someone who means it without qualification. He said his daughter's name was Masha and that Masha's regular Christmas Eve arrangement with her grandparents had fallen through at the last minute because his mother had slipped on ice that afternoon and was at the hospital with a suspected fracture, and his father had gone with her and there had been no one else, and he had not been able to reach Irina in time to cancel, and he had not had Elena's number, and he had made the decision to come anyway and hoped that was all right, and if it was not all right he completely understood. He said all of this in a single connected sequence of honesty that did not pause for my reaction, which I respected, and then he stopped and waited. I looked at him. I looked at Masha, who was looking at my wine glass with the focused attention of a child deciding whether to ask about it. I said it was all right. I said please sit down. He sat. Masha sat beside him and immediately began examining the small candle on the table with the methodical interest of a scientist. He watched her for a moment with the particular expression that parents have when they are in public with their children and monitoring at a frequency that does not interrupt the conversation but never fully stops. I asked how his mother was. He said the hospital had called while he was in the car and that it was a fracture but a clean one and she would be all right. He said he had spoken to his father and would go in the morning. He said she had told him not to cancel his plans, which was the kind of thing she said, and that he had not been sure it was the right decision but had made it anyway. I asked how long he had been a single parent. He looked at me with the slight adjustment of expression that people make when they appreciate a question being asked directly rather than arrived at sideways. He said 2 years. He said Masha's mother had left not because she was a bad person but because she had been honest enough to recognize that the life they were living was not the one she needed, and that honesty, while it had been painful, was something he had eventually come to respect even about a situation he had not chosen. He said it without bitterness, which told me something. Bitterness is easy after certain things. Its absence requires work. Masha, who had been listening in the partial way children listen when they are focused on something else, looked up and said that her grandmother made the best cake and that the hospital probably did not have cake. Andrei said probably not. Masha said that was a problem. I said I agreed, that hospitals on Christmas Eve should have better cake, and Masha looked at me with the evaluating expression of a child deciding whether an adult was worth talking to. She apparently decided yes. She asked my name. I told her. She said she liked green. I said I could see that her coat was a very good green. She said her papa had picked it. She said he was good at green but not as good at hair, and she indicated her braids, which were slightly uneven and had been done by someone who was doing their best with a skill they were still developing. Andrei accepted this assessment with the patience of a man who had heard it before and agreed with it. We ordered food. Masha requested something that was not on the menu and then accepted a modification of it with the diplomatic flexibility of a child who had learned that restaurants had limits. Andrei and I talked the way two people talk when there is a third very small person at the table who is also participating, which meant the conversation went in directions it would not have gone otherwise, directions that were more immediate and more honest because there was no room for the kind of performance that adult dinner sometimes allowed. He told me about his work, which was small business financial consulting, the kind of work that required patience and practicality and the ability to tell people things they needed to hear in ways they could receive. He told me about the years building it alone after the separation, the specific logistics of being a parent and a professional in a life where those two things competed for the same hours. He told me about the mornings and the school runs and the evenings that were full in the right way and the ones that were just full. I told him about the company. He asked real questions about it, not polite ones, questions that showed he understood what I was talking about and wanted to understand it further. I said something about a decision I had made in the second year that I had second-guessed ever since. He said that was the thing about decisions made with incomplete information, that the second-guessing was not a sign the decision was wrong but a sign you were honest enough to keep evaluating. I said I had not thought about it that way. He said he had not either until someone had said it to him about a different decision. Masha fell asleep somewhere between the main course and the dessert menu, leaning against her father's arm with her green coat folded under her head as a pillow, her blonde hair coming loose from one braid. Andrei moved slightly to accommodate her without interrupting the sentence he was in the middle of, the automatic adjustment of a parent whose body has learned to do two things at once. I watched him do it. We stayed until the restaurant was nearly empty. The snow outside had softened to the lighter kind that fell in the last hours of Christmas Eve before the day turned. The city had quieted to its late version, fewer people, slower light. He asked, when we finally stood to leave, if I would want to do this again. He said it without the appended reassurance that men sometimes added, the part where they said but without the unexpected child component, as if the child were a disadvantage to be apologized for rather than simply part of the honest picture. He just asked if I would want to do it again. I said yes. He picked Masha up without waking her, her head resting on his shoulder, her green coat hanging from his other hand. She made a small sound and settled back into sleep with the absolute trust of a child who knows the arms holding her. We walked out together into the Christmas Eve street and the snow and the city light. He had a car a short distance away. I was walking. We stood at the corner for a moment and he said it had been a very good evening despite the beginning. I said especially because of the beginning. He looked at me with the slight smile of someone hearing something they were glad to hear. I walked home through the snow and thought about a woman who had told herself 7:30 was the limit and had stayed until the restaurant was quiet and the evening was late and had found, in the hours she had almost not given, something that felt like the beginning of something real. The limit you set before you know what is coming is not always the right limit. Sometimes what arrives late arrives with a child in a green coat and honest eyes and uneven braids and changes the entire shape of the evening into something you would not have planned and cannot imagine having missed. Stay a little longer. What is coming through the door might be exactly worth the wait.